The wind sweeps over the vast plain of Kosovo Polji, carrying with it whispers of a day when the earth shook under the weight of thousands of marching feet, when the air was filled with the clash of steel and the cries of the dying. It is quiet now, but on that fateful day in 1389, this land would bear witness to an epic clash that would shape the fate of the Balkans forever, a battle where heroism and tragedy walked hand in hand, where kings and peasants alike stood shoulder to shoulder, knowing that many would not live to see the next sunrise. The Ottoman Empire, relentless in its expansion, had swept across Asia Minor into Europe, taking fortress after fortress, kingdom after kingdom, until the very heart of the Balkans felt the press of its unstoppable tide. At its head rode Sultan Murad I, a seasoned conqueror whose banners were carried by disciplined Janissaries, swift Sipahi cavalry, and warriors drawn from the far reaches of his growing empire. Facing him was a coalition forged not from strength, but from necessity, a gathering of Serbian nobles, Bosnian lords, and Albanian allies under the leadership of Prince Lazar Habeljanovic, a ruler who understood that this battle was not just about land, but about the survival of an entire way of life. For Lazar and his men, defeat would mean not just submission to a foreign ruler, but the loss of faith, culture, and identity. The two forces met on June 15th, St. Vitus Day, under a summer sky so deceptively calm that it seemed to mock the storm that was about to erupt. The grass on the field of blackbirds swayed in the warm breeze, hiding the countless spear tips that glinted in the morning light, and somewhere in the distance a lone bird, a skull, cut through the silence before the thunder of war began. Chroniclers speak of the night before, when Lazar is said to have gathered his knights and offered them a choice: victory in this life or glory in the next, a kingdom on earth or a kingdom in heaven. Whether these words were truly spoken or born from the songs of later centuries, the spirit of them lived in every man who tightened his grip on his sword that morning. The first charge came from the Serbian heavy cavalry, a wall of armored horsemen who crashed into the Ottoman flanks with such force that the earth seemed to tremble. Lances splintered, shields shattered, and for a moment it seemed as if the coalition might shatter the enemy lines. But the Ottomans were no strangers to such fury. Based, son of Murad, rallied his troops, counterattacked, and began to turn the tide. The battlefield dissolved into chaos, a storm of arrows, steel, and blood, where friend and foe were locked in desperate, breathless combat. Amid this carnage emerged the legend of Miloš Obilić, the Serbian knight who, according to tradition, penetrated the Ottoman camp and struck down Sultan Murad himself. The details are clouded in the mists of time. Some say he feigned surrender to get close, others that he cut through the guards with unmatched ferocity. But the story has endured for over 6 centuries, because it speaks to a deeper truth, that even in the face of overwhelming odds, courage can still find its moment. Yet that courage came at a terrible cost. By day's end, both commanders lay dead: Prince Lazar, captured and executed, Sultan Murad slain by the hand of an enemy. The field was carpeted with the fallen, the air heavy with the smell of blood and the groans of the dying. There was no clear victor, yet in the years to come, the Ottomans would recover faster and press their advantage, while Serbia's nobility, decimated and leaderless, would be unable to halt the slow tightening of the Ottoman grip. And so, the Battle of Kosovo became more than history, it became legend. In Serbian memory, it was transformed into a story of sacrifice, of a people choosing honor over life, of a covenant sealed in blood on the field of blackbirds. Songs and epics kept its memory alive through centuries of occupation, until it was woven into the very fabric of national identity. The battle was not remembered for a victory won, but for a stand made, a reminder that some struggles are worth facing, even when the outcome is all but certain. And as the wind still moves over Kosovo Polji today, it carries not just the scent of summer grass, but the echoes of that day when the destiny of the Balkans was forged in fire, faith, and the courage of those who refused to kneel. The late 14th century was an age of shifting borders, clashing faiths, and the rise of empires that would leave their mark on history for centuries to come. Across the Balkans, small kingdoms and principalities lived under the constant shadow of a power unlike any they had faced before. The Ottoman Empire, born on the fringes of Anatolia less than a century earlier, the Ottomans had grown from a frontier principality into a formidable state, driven by relentless ambition, military discipline, and a vision that stretched beyond continents. Their rise had been swift and unstoppable. Under leaders like Osman I and Orhan, the Ottomans consolidated their power in Asia Minor before turning their gaze toward Europe. The year 1354 marked a turning point. The capture of Gallipoli, this bridgehead into the Balkans, opened the floodgates, allowing Ottoman armies to pour into Thrace and Macedonia. City after city fell, sometimes through siege, sometimes through negotiated surrender, and sometimes through the sheer terror of their reputation. By the 1380s, they had claimed Adrianople at Ern as their European capital, and their influence reached deep into the heart of the Balkans. For Christian rulers, this expansion was not just a political threat, It was an existential one. The Ottomans did not merely demand tribute, they reshaped the political order wherever they ruled. Some local lords submitted and became vassals, paying taxes and supplying troops in exchange for keeping their lands. Others resisted and faced annihilation. It was a slow but steady tightening of the noose, and every year, the Ottoman presence crept closer to the remaining free territories. Among those who refused to bend the knee was Prince Lazar Hubiljanović, ruler of Moravian Serbia. Lazar was not a king by title, but in power and influence. He was the leading Serbian lord of his time. He understood the gravity of the Ottoman threat better than most. He had seen neighboring states fall, noble families forced into submission, and Christian churches turned into mosques. For him, the choice was clear: unite and resist, or stand alone and be crushed. But unity in the Balkans was easier said than done. Centuries of rivalries, shifting alliances, and local disputes had left scars between neighboring lords. Yet Lazar's diplomacy was persistent and skillful. Through a mixture of appeals to shared faith, the promise of mutual defense, and the recognition of a common enemy, he forged a coalition that stretched beyond Serbia's borders. This Serbian-led coalition included forces from Bosnia, commanded by the experienced noble Vlatko Vučević, as well as contingents from Albanian lords and possibly even Wallachian allies. These men brought with them not only soldiers but also diverse fighting traditions. Heavy cavalry from the Serbian and Bosnian nobility, skilled light cavalry from Albanian forces, and experienced infantry hardened by years of border warfare. It was a fragile alliance, bound together less by trust than by necessity. But it was the only hope of resisting the massive Ottoman war machine. What made the coming confrontation inevitable was not simply the will to resist, but the strategic importance of Kosovo. The region was far more than just a stretch of farmland in the middle of the Balkans. It was the beating heart of the crossroads between East and West. To the Ottomans, controlling Kosovo meant opening a direct corridor deeper into Europe, toward the Adriatic Sea and the trade-rich lands of Hungary and beyond. To the Serbian coalition, losing Kosovo would mean their lands would be split and their defenses crippled. Kosovo, Polji, the field of blackbirds, was not just a poet's name, it was the stage on which armies could maneuver, where cavalry could charge, and where the fate of entire realms could be decided. Roads from the north, south, east, and west converged there, making it the perfect mustering ground, and the perfect killing ground. Whoever held this plain could dominate the surrounding territories, control trade routes, and dictate the movement of armies. The Ottomans knew this. Sultan Murad I, ruler, both shrewd and battle-hardened, recognized that striking at Kosovo would not only cripple Lazar's coalition, but send a message to every other ruler in the Balkans. Resistance was futile. His sons, Bazid and Yaqub, commanded parts of the army, each eager to prove their skill and loyalty. The Ottoman host that gathered was a formidable blend of elite Janissaries, swift Sipahi cavalry, and auxiliaries drawn from across the empire's vast lands, from Anatolia to Thrace. For Lazar and his allies, defending Kosovo was about more than military strategy. It was a matter of survival, political, cultural, and spiritual. In an age when rulers invoked divine will to justify their wars, both sides believed they carried a sacred mission. To the Ottomans, their expansion into Christian lands was part of the eternal jihad, a holy struggle sanctioned by God. To the Serbian coalition, the battle was a defense of Christendom itself, a stand against a tide that threatened to erase their faith from the land. By the spring of 1389, both armies were already on the move. Skirmishes and raids had tested the edges of their strength, but the coming battle would be something far greater. The coalition forces assembled at Kosovo Polji, bringing with them not only men and arms, but also the weight of their people's hopes and fears. The Ottoman army advanced steadily, their banners visible from miles away, their march disciplined and unrelenting. The air was thick with anticipation. Messengers darted between camps, carrying news of enemy positions. Blacksmiths worked furiously to repair armor and sharpen swords. Priests and imams offered blessings, each side convinced that divine favor would be theirs. For some, this was a chance at glory. For others, it was a death march they could not escape. In the days before the battle, Prince Lazar is said to have moved among his men, speaking not as a distant ruler but as a comrade-at-arms. Chroniclers, whether writing from fact or legend, tell of a fateful choice he presented to his followers: victory in this life or glory in the next, the fleeting safety of submission or the eternal honor of sacrifice. These words, real or imagined, captured the essence of the moment, the understanding that what was to come would decide not just the outcome of a war, but the direction of history itself. Kosovo, in that summer of 1389, was a place where the ambitions of an empire and the defiance of a people collided. It was a stage set for one of the most remembered confrontations in medieval Europe, a battle that would end with both sides bloodied and leaderless. Yet with the future of the Balkans irrevocably altered, the Ottoman Empire, with its vast resources and disciplined armies, sought to secure the corridor that would lead them deeper into the heart of Europe. The Serbian coalition, bound together by necessity and the desperate hope of survival, stood as a wall against the tide. The days ahead would see courage and treachery, valor and despair. But before the first clash of steel on that fateful morning, the historical background of the Battle of Kosovo was already one of inevitability. A collision written in the geography of the land, the ambitions of rulers, and the unyielding march of an empire that had set its sights on the very heart of Europe. The dawn of June 1389 cast a strange, heavy light over the rolling plains of Kosovo, where two armies, each the embodiment of an era's ambition, pride, and survival, stood poised to decide the fate of the Balkans. On one side stood the Serbian-led coalition, a patchwork yet formidable force under the determined command of Prince Lazar Obilić, ruler of Moravian Serbia. Lazar, a man of both political acumen and personal piety, understood all too well that this confrontation was more than a mere military campaign. It was a stand against the relentless Ottoman tide that had been pressing westward for decades. His banner did not only represent his own realm, it was the rallying point for a rare unity among the often divided Balkan lords. At his side stood some of the most prominent Serbian nobles, each bringing their own retinues of armored knights and seasoned infantry. Among them was Vuk Branković, the powerful lord of Kosovo, and Metahija, whose lands would soon become the very theater of the unfolding drama. Reinforcements had also come from beyond Serbia's borders. Bosnian troops, commanded by the respected and battle-hardened Vlatko Vučević, Ban of Hum and vassal of King Tofko I of Bosnia, had marched into the fray. These men, clad in mail and wielding long spears, carried the martial traditions of Bosnia into the coalition, and their presence reflected the recognition that the Ottoman advance threatened all Christian polities in the region. Not merely Serbia. There were also contingents from various Balkan principalities, smaller bands of warriors from Montenegro, Herzegovina, and even Albanian regions, each answering Lazar's call in a moment that transcended local rivalries. The Serbian-led host was a vivid mosaic of armor, banners, dialects, and fighting styles. Heavy cavalry, the pride of Balkan warfare, formed the steel-tipped core of Lazar's army, flanked by disciplined spearmen, agile light infantry skilled in ambush tactics, and crossbowmen ready to unleash deadly volleys against Ottoman ranks. Yet across the field, the Ottoman Empire had arrived in full strength under the personal command of Sultan Murad I, a ruler whose reign had already reshaped the political landscape of southeastern Europe. Murad, a shrewd strategist and devout believer in the divine mission of expanding his dominion, had assembled a war machine that blended the best of Anatolian, Rumelian, and steppe traditions. Beside him rode his two sons, Bayezid, the fierce and impulsive warrior who would later be known as Yildirim the Thunderbolt for his lightning-fast campaigns, and Jakub Kelebey, a capable leader in his own right. Their presence at Kosovo underscored the importance the Ottomans placed on this battle. It was not merely an expedition, but a dynastic, a generational push toward dominance over the Balkans. At the heart of Murad's army were the Janissaries, the elite infantry corps whose discipline, unmatched marksmanship with the composite bow, and steadfast loyalty made them the Sultan's most formidable asset. Clad in distinctive headgear and trained from youth to fight without fear, these soldiers formed the unbreakable spine of the Ottoman battle line. Flanking them were the Sipahis, the Ottoman cavalry drawn from the timber-based feudal system, armored in lamellar or mail, mounted on swift horses bred for endurance and speed. These riders were masters of the feigned retreat, skirmishing, and sudden devastating charges that could shatter an enemy's cohesion. Supporting these core units was a wide array of auxiliary forces, SAPs, light infantry, Akanki raiders, and contingents from Ottoman vassal states in Bulgaria, Anatolia, and beyond. Each brought their own weapons, armor, and tactics. Nimble archers from Anatolia, fearsome light cavalry from the steppes, and siege engineers accustomed to breaking fortified positions. The contrast between the two armies was stark, not only in their composition but in their cultural and strategic mindsets. The Serbian-led coalition was a gathering of independent lords, united by necessity, each retaining a degree of autonomy and loyalty to their own banners as much as to the collective cause. Their strength lay in their heavily armored knightsmen who fought with the weight of steel, the momentum of their horses, and the fierce pride of their lineage. Many among them carried swords and lances that had been passed down through generations, each bearing marks of past battles. Their morale was tied to notions of honor, faith, and defense of their homelands. And the presence of Prince Lazar, a figure both respected and revered, gave them a focal point for unity. Yet this unity was fragile, for the coalition was as much a diplomatic feat as it was a military one. Rivalries and personal ambitions simmered beneath the surface. And not all participants saw the battle in the same lightsome as a defensive stand, others as an opportunity for glory, and a few as a reluctant obligation. The Ottomans, by contrast, marched as a single, centralized force, bound by the authority of the Sultan and the rewards of conquest. Their army was not only vast but also organized according to a system that blended the fluid, adaptability of nomadic warfare with the logistical discipline of an empire. The Janissaries stood in the center, anchored by artillery and siege crews, prepared to turn the tide if the battle became static. The Sipahi cavalry operated in coordinated wings, ready to envelop or harry the enemy from multiple directions. Auxiliary units, often underestimated by their foes, played critical roles in reconnaissance, harassment, and absorbing the first blows of enemy charges. The Ottomans also relied on psychological warfares, spreading fear through their reputation for relentless pursuit and the promise of no quarter for those who resisted. As the sun rose higher over the plains, both armies arrayed themselves for the clash. Standards fluttered in the morning wind, bearing the crosses of Serbia and Bosnia on one side, the crescent and toe of the Ottoman Sultan on the other. The sounds of preparation filled the air, the stamping of horses, the rhythmic clatter of armor being adjusted, the shouted orders of captains rallying their men into formation. Behind these sights and sounds lay a deeper tension. Each side knew the other was no stranger to battle. This was not a meeting of an untested force against a veteran one, but a collision of two seasoned military traditions honed by decades of conflict. The force-strength debate, a matter still contested by historians centuries later, only adds to the mystique of Kosovo. Contemporary chronicles, often colored by the biases of their authors, give wildly varying figures. Some claim that the Ottomans brought as many as 100,000 men, while others suggest the Serbs fielded an improbably small force that triumphed against overwhelming odds. Modern historians, drawing on logistical reasoning and comparative records, generally estimate that both armies numbered somewhere between 25,000 and 40,000 troops each. This numerical parity, rare for such monumental encounters, meant that neither side could rely on sheer numbers alone to secure victory. Instead, the outcome would hinge on leadership, coordination, and the ability to adapt to the chaos of battle. Yet numbers tell only part of the story. For the Serbian-led coalition, every man on the field represented a community, a village, a family whose survival might depend on the outcome. Many warriors bore icons or religious tokens into battle, believing that divine favor could turn the tide. The spiritual dimension was profound. Prince Lazar himself is said to have viewed the confrontation as a sacred duty, a test of faith as much as of arms. For the Ottomans, the campaign was imbued with the ideology of Gazahali war, framed as both a religious and imperial mission to expand the realm of Islam. Sultan Murad's presence was itself a statement. The ruler of a burgeoning empire had come personally to oversee the subjugation of the Balkans, signaling both confidence and the high stakes of the enterprise. Strategically, the coalition faced a formidable challenge. While their heavy cavalry could potentially break Ottoman lines with a decisive charge, such an attack required careful timing and coordination, especially against an enemy adept at absorbing and countering shock assaults. The Ottomans, on the other hand, would seek to exploit their mobility, disciplined infantry, and the layered structure of their battle formations to wear down and envelop the coalition. The geography of Kosovo Polji, a wide, open plain with gently undulating terrain, favored large-scale cavalry maneuvers, but offered little cover for retreat or regrouping, making the initial engagements all the more critical. Both sides knew that a decisive blow early in the battle could cascade into total victory or catastrophic defeat. As the last moments of preparation ticked away, the battlefield became a living tableau of anticipation and resolve. On the Serbian side, knights mounted their desks, adjusting their lances and tightening the straps of their helmets. Infantrymen checked their shields and spears, exchanging brief nods with comrades. Priests moved among the ranks, offering blessings and prayers, the murmured chants mingling with the metallic chorus of an army readying for war. Across the field, the Ottomans tightened their own lines. Janissaries planted their heavy pavises in the ground. Archers tested their bowstrings, and cavalrymen adjusted saddles and bridles. The banners of the Sultan rippled above the mass of soldiers, the gold-threaded calligraphy glinting in the sun, a visual reminder of imperial authority. It was a confrontation that encapsulated the fate of an entire region, an inflection point in the long, turbulent struggle between Christian and Muslim powers in southeastern Europe. The Serbian-led coalition fought with the desperation of those defending their homeland against a force that threatened to reshape their world. The Ottomans fought with the confidence of an ascendant empire, intent on pushing its frontier ever deeper into Europe. Each side's composition reflected centuries of cultural, political, and military evolution, and as the first horns and drums signaled the advance, the air seemed to tremble with the weight of history in the making. No one on that field could have known the precise shape of the future, but all understood that by day's end, the balance of power in the Balkans and, perhaps, the destiny of entire nations would be forever altered. The summer of 1389 dawned over the Balkan Peninsula under a sky heavy with tension, the air itself seeming to vibrate with the unspoken certainty that the region stood on the threshold of an epoch-defining clash. For decades, the Ottoman Empire had been steadily advancing into Europe, its armies crossing the Dardanelles and sweeping through Thrace, Macedonia, and Bulgaria. What had begun as opportunistic raids in previous decades had evolved into a systematic campaign of domination. Villages on the frontiers of Serbia, Bosnia, and Wallachia bore the scars of relentless Ottoman incursions. Burned homes, plundered fields, and emptied churches stood as silent witnesses to the empire's tightening grip. Along the Drina Morava and Vardar rivers, weary peasants whispered of marauding Timurid cavalry sweeping through their lands, taking livestock, demanding tribute, and leaving devastation in their wake. Skirmishes flared like sparks along the frontier, often too minor to be remembered in chronicles, yet each one feeding the growing fire of resentment and fear. Lords and princes of the Balkans, once rivals more concerned with their own disputes, began to realize that the tide of conquest would not stop at their neighbor. Borderate was coming for them all. The Ottoman strategy in the region was both military and psychological. They didn't simply fight battles. They projected dominance, demanding vassalage from rulers and leveraging local divisions to weaken resistance. Some nobles had already bent the knee to Sultan Murad I, sending hostages to the Ottoman court as guarantees of loyalty. Others, like Prince Lazar Obilić of Serbia, saw submission as a betrayal of both sovereignty and faith. Lazar's lands had already felt the sting of Ottoman raids, but he had also watched their steady expansion into former Byzantine territories with growing alarm. The looming threat was no longer just a distant empire, it was an immediate presence, pressing at Serbia's frontiers. The fragile political balance of the Balkans teetered dangerously, and the whisper of war became a roar. The breaking point came as Ottoman forays into Serbian and Bosnian lands became more frequent and more destructive in the late 1380s. Reports spread of villages emptied of able-bodied men, either slain or carried off into bondage, and of churches desecrated, their bells silenced. These were not isolated acts of violence, they were part of a deliberate strategy to weaken the morale and infrastructure of the Christian states. In marketplaces and monasteries, voices rose in anger, and bards recited songs of ancient heroism, reminding the people of times when their ancestors had driven out invaders. But this time, the foe was unlike any they had faced before. Disciplined, relentless, and armed with both superior numbers and the conviction of a rising empire. Against this backdrop of dread and defiance, the idea of a grand coalition began to take shape. It was not an easy vision to realize. The rulers of the Balkans had long histories of rivalry and mistrust, and alliances were often fragile, made for convenience rather than unity. Yet the Ottoman threat forced a reckoning. Prince Lazar, a respected figure among Serbian nobility, took on the role of principal organizer. His call for aid echoed across the region, reaching King Tvcoi of Bosnia, the Knights of St. John in distant Rhodes, and even Sigismund of Hungary. Though some responses were hesitant, the urgency of the moment overcame centuries of feuds and jealousies. By the spring of 1389, emissaries traveled dusty roads under banners, bearing the cross, carrying messages of unity against the encroaching Muslim power. It was in this spirit of desperation and determination that Kosovo, Polji the Field of Blackbirds, was chosen as the site where the coalition would make its stand. Situated in the heart of the Serbian lands, Kosovo was a broad, fertile plain, bordered by rivers and surrounded by gentle hills. Its strategic location made it ideal for gathering a large force, and its open terrain offered space for cavalry maneuvers, a decisive factor in medieval warfare. But the choice carried symbolic weight as well. The field was steeped in local lore, a place where the earth itself seemed to hum with the memory of past struggles. To muster there was to declare openly that the Christian lords would not hide in fortresses or retreat into mountain passes. They would meet the Ottomans, face to face on the open field. By June, the plain began to fill with warriors. Under the fluttering banners of their lords, men arrived from every corner of the coalition lands. Serbian heavy cavalry with their long lances and chainmail, Bosnian spearmen with round shields painted in bright heraldic colors, ragged contingents from the mountains armed with axes and crossbows. Monks walked among the campfires, offering blessings and hearing confessions, while blacksmiths hammered out last-minute repairs to armor. The air was thick with the mingled scents of horse sweat, burning pitch, and the smoke of roasting meat. Each day brought new arrivals, and with them, new rumors. Some said the Ottomans were already marching from Edirne with an army that dwarfed anything the Christians could field. Others claimed that allies from Hungary or even distant Poland were on the way. In the uncertainty, hope and fear wrestled for dominance in every heart. Yet what bound these men together was more than politics or self-preservation. It was a fervent belief that they stood as the last bulwark of Christendom in the Balkans. Chroniclers of the time, both Christian and Ottoman, would later frame the coming battle in starkly religious terms. To the Christian soldiers, this was no mere contest of armies. It was a holy war, a defense of the faith against the advance of Islam. Priests held processions before the ranks, lifting high relics of saints and splinters of the true cross. Hymns rose over the plain, mingling with the clang of weapons and the restless stamping of horses. Warriors knelt in the dust to receive communion, some weeping openly, others whispering oaths to fight to the death. Many believed that to fall in such a cause would guarantee their place in paradise. On the other side, Sultan Murad's forces carried their own spiritual certainty. The Ottomans saw themselves as the sword of Islam, chosen by Allah to expand the faith and bring order to lands beyond their current dominion. Murad's march into Kosovo was not merely a military campaign, it was a continuation of a divine mission begun generations earlier. His soldiers, hardened by years of campaigning in Anatolia and Europe, carried banners inscribed with Quranic verses. And the Sultan's imams promised that those who died in the coming fight would be martyrs, rewarded in the hereafter. To them, Kosovo was not just an enemy stronghold. It was a stepping stone to the deeper conquest of Europe. This clash of convictions, as much as the clash of swords and spears, defined the tension of the days before battle. In the Christian camp, scouts returned with news of Ottoman movements, each report more alarming than the last. Writers spoke of the enemy's disciplined formations, their Janissaries moving like a living wall, and the thunder of their cavalry spreading terror in the countryside. In response, Lazar's captains argued over tactics late into the night, whether to meet the Ottomans head-on or attempt to lure them into a trap. Every decision felt fraught with consequence, for there would be no second chance if they failed. As the days passed, the plain of Kosovo transformed into a crucible of human will. Warriors drilled in formation, learning to fight alongside unfamiliar allies. Blacksmiths and armorers worked tirelessly to keep weapons sharp and shields sturdy. Messengers galloped in and out, carrying orders and intelligence. Yet despite the bustle of preparation, a somber undercurrent pervaded the camp. Men wrote hurried letters to their families, entrusted to monks or camp followers who might survive the carnage to carry them home. Songs were sung not just to inspire courage, but to etch memories into the hearts of comrades in case the morning brought death. And then came the final days before the great collision. The Ottomans were near close enough that campfires could be seen on the horizon at night, flickering like a line of ominous stars. Both armies knew the other was there, just beyond sight in the daylight, moving into position. On the eve of battle, the Christian hosts gathered once more for Mass. Prince Lazar stood before his men, clad in armor yet crowned with the solemnity of a leader who understood the weight of the moment. His words, though lost to exact history, were remembered in spirit, a call to stand firm, to fight not just for their own lives but for the faith, the land, and the generations yet unborn. Thus the prelude ended not with quiet, but with the steady drumbeat of inevitability. The tension in the Balkans, forged by years of raids and skirmishes, had driven once fractured realms into a fragile yet determined coalition. The plain of Kosovo Polji had become the stage upon which history would hinge, and both sides marched under banners heavy with religious fervor, convinced that divine will walked with them. When dawn broke on June 28, 1389, the world would witness not just the meeting of two armies, but the collision of empires, faiths, and destinies. The morning of June 15, 1389, known to many as St. Vitus Day, dawned over the Kosovo plain with a stillness that belied the storm about to erupt. The sun rose slowly, casting its relentless summer heat over tens of thousands of warriors gathered for a clash that would echo through centuries. The Serbian-led coalition, led by Prince Lazar, had arrayed their forces with careful precision. Heavy cavalry formed the spearhead, their lances gleaming in the sunlight, banners snapping in the breeze. Infantry filled the gaps between the mounted ranks, spearmen braced behind wooden pavesses, crossbowmen crouched ready to unleash deadly volleys. The air was tense with anticipation, a mixture of fear, courage, and the conviction that they were defending not just their lands, but the very faith and identity of their people. Across the field, the Ottoman army under Sultan Murad I spread out in disciplined formations. Janissaries lined the center, their composure and training a wall against any frontal assault, while Sipahi cavalry flanked them, horses snorting and stamping, ready to sweep around any enemy breach. Murad's sons, Bazid and Yakub, rode among the ranks, ensuring that the massive army held its cohesion and discipline. As the first horn sounded, the Serbian heavy cavalry surged forward like a living tide, striking the Ottoman flanks with the full force of their momentum. Knights in polished armor, mounted on powerful destriers, crashed into the enemy lines, lances splintering and shields splintering under the impact. The initial charge caused panic among some Ottoman auxiliaries who faltered at the shock of the sudden, brutal onslaught. Horses reared, men shouted, and the ground shook under the weight of armored riders. For a moment, it seemed that the coalition might break through, creating an opening that could turn the battle decisively in their favor. The thunder of hooves, the clash of steel, and the cries of men echoed across the plain, mingling with the smell of sweat, dust, and blood. Yet the Ottomans were not so easily dislodged. Bazid, seizing the moment with a decisiveness that would earn him the epithet Thunderbolt, led a disciplined counterattack. Ottoman cavalry wheeled around the Serbian advance, supported by steady ranks of Janissaries who fired arrows and hurled javelins into the charging knights. The initial momentum of the Serbian cavalry slowed, as they were met by a wall of coordinated defense, and the fighting soon devolved into brutal close-quarters combat. Men grappled for swords, axes, and spears, fighting for every foot of ground under the scorching summer sun. Dust rose in thick clouds, mixing with the acrid scent of blood and sweat, while the cries of the wounded and dying filled the air. Shields were shattered, armor dented, and both sides endured staggering casualties in the relentless melee. The intensity of the fighting was unlike anything many of the young soldiers had ever experienced. It was a test of endurance, skill, and sheer will. Amid this chaos, one of the most enduring legends of the battle took shape. According to Serbian epic tales, the knight Miloš Obilić managed to infiltrate the Ottoman camp under the cover of confusion. Whether through cunning disguise or sheer daring, he reached the tent of Sultan Murad I and delivered a fatal blow. Accounts vary, some suggesting he stabbed the Sultan during prayer, others describing a sudden ambush in the heart of the Ottoman command. The death of Murad I sent shockwaves through the Ottoman ranks. Soldiers paused, uncertainty rippling through their formations, while the Sultan's sons and commanders scrambled to stabilize the lines. Though the Janissaries and Sipahi cavalry quickly regained cohesion under Bayezid's leadership, the psychological impact of losing their sovereign at the very center of the battlefield was profound. At the same time, tragedy struck the Serbian forces. Prince Lazar, the steadfast leader of the coalition, fell during the melee, whether cut down by Ottoman swords or overwhelmed amid the chaos of combat. His death created a void in command that sent ripples of uncertainty through the Serbian lines. Soldiers who had fought with unwavering courage now struggled to maintain formation and coordination. In this crucible of violence, both armies found themselves leaderless in the most critical moments, their discipline tested as never before. The battle continued with relentless ferocity, each side grappling not only with the enemy but with the knowledge that their generals, their symbols of strategy and morale, were gone. The fighting on Kosovo Polje became a grinding struggle of endurance and brutality. Infantrymen hacked at their foes with axes and swords, knights collided in repeated charges, and the ground itself became a quagmire of mud, blood, and bodies. Archers and crossbowmen fired relentlessly, adding layers of chaos to the melee, while cavalry swept in repeatedly to exploit weaknesses. Heat, fatigue, and fear weighed heavily on every combatant. Men who had been confident in the morning now fought simply to survive until the next breath. Throughout the day, the battle ebbed and flowed in a series of deadly engagements, no side able to gain decisive advantage. What began as a clash of formations devolved into a brutal, personal fight for life and honor, where skill, luck, and sheer determination determined survival. The legends that grew from this day have echoed through centuries, painting Kosovo as a crucible of heroism and tragedy. The stories of Miloš Obilić's daring deed, Prince Lazar's valiant stand, and the indomitable courage of countless unnamed warriors became the foundation of national memory. Both armies, despite their losses and the chaos of leadership decapitation, ultimately withdrew in a haze of exhaustion and despair. The battlefield, strewn with the dead and dying, bore witness to the staggering cost of the confrontation. Nobles and commoners alike had fallen. Horses lay broken and bloodied, and the plains were drenched in the sacrifices of both sides. Though the battle's outcome is often described as inconclusive, the consequences were immediate and profound. The deaths of Sultan Murad I and Prince Lazar created a vacuum of leadership that reshaped the political landscape. Murad's son, Bayezid, would assume command, consolidating the Ottoman forces and continuing expansion in the Balkans with renewed vigor. Meanwhile, the Serbian coalition, despite its courage and valor, was left fractured and vulnerable. Its ability to resist further Ottoman advances severely weakened. In the aftermath, Kosovo Polje became not just a battlefield, but a symbol of the high cost of defending sovereignty, faith, and identity against a relentless empire. By the end of that sweltering St. Vitus Day, the plains of Kosovo had been transformed into a theater of epic confrontation, where the ideals of heroism and the brutality of war collided. Every sword strike, every charge, every desperate defense contributed to a narrative that would endure in the collective memory of the region. The Battle of Kosovo was not merely a fight over land. It was a struggle over faith, honor, and the very soul of the Balkans, where the echoes of both triumph and tragedy would reverberate for generations to come. The smoke and dust of Kosovo Polje had barely begun to settle when the grim reality of the battle-esque aftermath became clear. On the surface, the confrontation of June 15, 1389, appeared as a tactical stalemate. Neither the Serbian-led coalition nor the Ottoman army had secured an immediate, decisive victory. Both sides had suffered staggering casualties, the plains littered with the dead and dying, their armor dented, banners torn, and horses collapsed in pools of blood. The very earth seemed to have absorbed the pain and heroism of the day. Yet beneath this apparent parity lay a subtle but profound advantage for the Ottomans. Despite losing their Sultan, Murad I, the Ottoman forces retained organizational cohesion, disciplined formations, and a logistical capacity that allowed them to recover far more quickly than their battered Christian adversaries. Their ability to regroup, replenish, and maintain strategic momentum meant that while the Serbs could claim moral courage and tales of heroism, the Ottomans had secured a longer-term strategic upper hand that would shape the future of the Balkans. In Serbia itself, the consequences of the battle were immediate and far-reaching. The death of Prince Lazar Obilić left a power vacuum at the heart of the Serbian realm. Lazar had been the unifying force for the coalition and the central figure around whom loyalty and strategy coalesced. Without him, local nobles struggled to maintain cohesion, often reverting to long-standing rivalries and parochial interests. Villages and towns, already weakened by years of Ottoman raids and the devastation of Kosovo Polji, found themselves increasingly vulnerable. Over the subsequent decades, this absence of strong leadership paved the way for Serbia's gradual subjugation. Political marriages, tribute payments, and eventual vassalage to the Ottoman Sultanate became unavoidable realities. The Serbian nobility, though brave and skilled, could not maintain a united front against the relentless pressure of a centralized expanding empire, and the country slowly transitioned from a proud independent kingdom into a vassal state, subject to Ottoman influence and control. Meanwhile, the young Bayezid I, son of the slain Sultan Murad, quickly rose to command the Ottoman forces, demonstrating both ruthless efficiency and strategic brilliance. Known later as Yildirim or the Thunderbolt, Bayezid wasted no time consolidating his father's gains in the Balkans. He reorganized the Ottoman army, strengthened garrisons along key frontier towns, and secured submission from neighboring principalities. Under his leadership, the Ottomans transformed their hard-won presence at Kosovo into a lasting foothold that would serve as a springboard for further expansion into Europe. The psychological impact of Murad's death, initially a source of shock, was swiftly countered by Bayezid's decisive actions, reinforcing the image of the Ottomans as both resilient and unstoppable. In this sense, the Battle of Kosovo, though tactically inconclusive, became a strategic triumph for the Ottomans, as it cleared the way for centuries of Ottoman presence in southeastern Europe. Beyond politics and military consequences, the battle left an indelible mark on the cultural and spiritual memory of the region. For the Serbs, the loss of Lazar and the heroic tales of warriors like Miloš Obilić became central to national identity, inspiring songs, epics, and a deep sense of sacrifice in defense of faith and homeland. For the Ottomans, the events at Kosovo reinforced their reputation as a dominant power in Europe, capable of absorbing setbacks and turning the death of a sultan into a demonstration of imperial continuity and strength. In the centuries that followed, Kosovo Polji would be remembered not only as a battlefield but as a symbol of courage, tragedy, and the inexorable forces of history that shaped the destinies of empires and nations alike. The aftermath of the battle also highlighted the shifting nature of warfare and leadership in the late medieval Balkans. Armies could clash with staggering loss of life, yet the outcomes were not solely determined by heroism or the courage of individuals. The ability to recover, reorganize, and maintain administrative and logistical systems proved decisive. In this regard, the Ottomans had demonstrated the hallmarks of an enduring military and political machine: discipline, centralized command, and the foresight to integrate diverse forces into a coherent strategy. The Serbian coalition, valiant though it was, could not match this level of systemic resilience. Their valor, immortalized in epic poetry and song, could not compensate for the structural weaknesses that emerged once their leaders fell. By the end of 1389, the Balkans had been irrevocably transformed. Serbia's autonomy was compromised, Ottoman influence was solidified, and the young Bayezid I emerged as a leader whose reputation for decisiveness and speed would dominate the region for decades. The field of Kosovo had become more than a battlefield. It was a turning point where heroism met historical inevitability, where individual acts of bravery intersected with the broader forces of empire, religion, and strategy. Though many details of the battle remain contested in historical records, the consequences were undeniable: a strategic victory for the Ottomans, the gradual decline of Serbian sovereignty, and the rise of a new generation of leaders poised to reshape the future of southeastern Europe. The Battle of Kosovo, though fought over 6 centuries ago, has left a legacy that continues to resonate deeply in the Balkans, particularly within Serbian culture and identity. In the centuries that followed, it became far more than a military engagement. It evolved into a symbol of sacrifice, martyrdom, and unyielding resistance. Prince Lazar and his warriors, many of whom perished on that fateful June day, were immortalized as paragons of courage and devotion. Their deeds celebrated in epic poetry, folk songs, and historical chronicles that passed from generation to generation. The very notion of Kosovo Polje, the field of blackbirds, transcended geography, becoming a conceptual space where Serbian valor and the willingness to defend faith and homeland were eternally enshrined. Each telling emphasized not just the violence of the day, but the spiritual and moral dimensions of the conflict. To fight at Kosovo was to fight for something larger than oneself, a conviction that imbued the Serbian narrative with a sense of noble purpose and tragic heroism. Religious significance intertwined seamlessly with these nationalistic interpretations. The battle, fought on St. Vitus's Day, became forever linked to the Serbian Orthodox calendar as Vidovdan, a date imbued with deep spiritual and cultural meaning. Every year, commemorations of Vidovdan recall the sacrifices of Lazar and his knights, blending ritual, remembrance, and moral reflection. For centuries, monasteries and churches preserved icons and relics associated with the battle, framing it as not merely a political or military event, but a holy struggle, a confrontation where divine will and human courage intersected. Clergy and chroniclers emphasized the sanctity of the fight, presenting it as an emblem of the defense of Christendom against Ottoman encroachment. This fusion of national and religious symbolism gave the battle an enduring resonance, turning Kosovo Polje into a site of pilgrimage, reflection, and cultural memory that reinforced Serbian identity even under centuries of foreign domination. Yet, alongside these commemorations and religious observances, the Battle of Kosovo also became a subject of historiographical debate and myth-making. Chroniclers, bards, and poets over the centuries romanticized the event, emphasizing heroism, betrayal, and divine favor, while sometimes obscuring or exaggerating the historical record. The legendary tale of Miloš Obilić, for example, who allegedly infiltrated the Ottoman camp and assassinated Sultan Murad I. It became a foundational story of courage and cunning, even as historians continue to question its precise accuracy. Epic songs and folk narratives shaped collective memory, transforming battlefield tactics and political consequences into a symbolic story of moral and spiritual struggle. This mythologization not only preserved the memory of the battle, but also allowed successive generations to reinterpret it according to contemporary needs, reinforcing ideas of sacrifice, national unity, and resistance even in times of foreign rule or internal turmoil. Strategically, Kosovo marked a turning point in the Balkans, signaling the gradual end of medieval Serbian independence and the unstoppable advance of the Ottoman Empire into Europe. Although both armies suffered heavy casualties and the immediate tactical outcome was ambiguous, the long-term consequences were decisive. Serbia's political and military cohesion weakened with the death of Prince Lazar, while the Ottomans, under the leadership of Bayezid I, consolidated their foothold in the region and continued to expand their influence across the Balkans. The battle's outcome reshaped the balance of power, demonstrating the rising dominance of the Ottoman military machine and foreshadowing centuries of Ottoman presence in southeastern Europe. In this sense, Kosovo was more than a single day of combat. It was a historical inflection point, a marker of the transition from medieval Balkan polities to an era dominated by Ottoman authority. In the centuries that followed, the legacy of Kosovo Polje became inseparable from Serbian national consciousness. It served as a moral touchstone, a reference point for courage, loyalty, and the profound cost of defending one's homeland. Religious observances on Vidovdan, epic poetry, and historical reflection reinforced the narrative of noble sacrifice, ensuring that even generations far removed from the events of 1389 could feel a deep connection to the ideals and tragedies of that day. Meanwhile, historians and scholars continued to debate the precise facts, teasing apart myth from reality, yet recognizing that the symbolic power of Kosovo often transcended the limits of historical documentation. The battlefield, though silent and overgrown with time, lives on in collective memory as a place where heroism and tragedy intersected, where faith, honor, and history converged, and where the contours of the Balkan world were irrevocably reshaped. Ultimately, the Battle of Kosovo's legacy is multifaceted. It is a national emblem of sacrifice and resistance, a religious symbol celebrated annually on Vidovdan, a subject of poetic and historical reinterpretation, and a geopolitical turning point that heralded the rise of the Ottoman Empire in Europe. Its enduring power lies not only in the bloodshed of a single day, but in the way that event has been remembered, commemorated, and mythologized for centuries, shaping the identities, faith, and historical consciousness of generations. Kosovo Polje, once a plain of steel and fire, now stands immortal in the collective imagination, a testament to human courage, the tragic cost of conflict, and the inexorable march of history. As we reflect on the Battle of Kosovo, it becomes clear that this was far more than a simple clash of armies on a summer day in 1389. It was a turning point in the fate of nations, a moment where courage, strategy, faith, and tragedy converged on a single battlefield. The actions of Prince Lazar Miloš Obilić Sultan Murad I and countless unnamed warriors shaped not only the immediate outcome of the confrontation but the broader trajectory of the Balkans for centuries to come. The field itself, Kosovo, Polji, is more than soil, and grass. It is a silent witness to heroism and sacrifice, to the dreams of kingdoms and the harsh realities of war. It reminds us that every advance and every loss carries a weight far beyond the moment, a legacy that can echo through generations. Yet as much as history honors the fallen, it also invites us to reflect. Legends live on, immortalized in songs, poems, and stories passed from one generation to the next, preserving the courage, honor, and devotion of those who fought. At the same time, the battle is a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict, the lives lost and futures altered by the decisions of leaders and the tides of empires. Today, as we look back at Kosovo, Polji, we are called not only to remember the past, but to learn from it. The price of both victory and defeat is written in blood, courage, and memory. So, whether you are drawn to history for its tales of strategy, heroism, or the shaping of civilizations, let the story of Kosovo inspire reflection. Dive into the legends, explore the truths behind the myths, and consider the enduring lessons that history leaves for us. And as you watch, remember, every battle, every decision, and every act of bravery has consequences far beyond the battlefield, the reminder that history is alive, waiting to teach, inspire, and guide us even today.